Greetings and welcome to part 2 of the United Earth Federation Treaty. First off, I would like to apologize to the former attorney lady who put out her warning about this so-called SCN and Alex Jones. My first video production, of course, was pretty naive and must admit it kind of needs a little work. But most of the message was put out. However, you didn't understand it, please accept my apology. And upon your request, I can furnish you the full document, as you see here. It is the prototype of the true United Earth Federation Treaty, not the carbon copy, the BS, fake one that the United Nations made. All that was a cop-out carbon copy to endorse their evil plans for a New World Order. The real United Earth Federation, not United Federation Earth, United Earth Federation does not endorse the New World Order. So if you would like a copy of this, please send me an email at Lechner Ted, all lowercase, that's LECHNER TED @gmail.com, and I will send that out to you ASAP as soon as I get your email. So we're going to continue in part 2 now about the freedom of religion and personal character. Okay, this is part 2 of the future actual United Earth Federation Treaty. This should also, if people are smart and jump on this, will put a stumbling stone in front of the SCN Illuminati, who are inspiring their fake United Federation of Earth, which is a carbon copy for a cop-out of a second Holocaust called the New World Order. It is called the Treaty of Religion and Character. The world leaders of all known nations around the world, hereinafter referred to as the parties, having been gathered on this day, be acknowledged by this treaty as a friendly gathering of peace and meeting of the minds for harmony in each and every nation's respected customs and traditions. For it shall be known on this day and for all times that the rights of humanity of each and every nation shall not be coerced, harassed, insulted, dishonored by their honored customs and beliefs, nor forced by any means of torture, assault, or other conflicts inflicted upon any given nation for the beliefs and traditions that each nation is accustomed to in their own right and beliefs, and that they shall be allowed to continue their practices of customs and traditions of worship, as each nation sees fit, without malice or harassment and physical suffering by legal or military in suffering of any other nation from around the world or from another sect of the galaxy thereof. These then shall be the terms of the treaty, of which will be upheld to the full extent of the United Earth Federation Treaty, and by the Charter of the United Federation of Planets, not a New World Order, for which is and shall be protected by the worldwide Constitution of the United Federation of Planets, and backed by the countermanding order known as the New Christian Order, which prohibits any evil plots, ploys, premeditation of malice, or harassment for such evils that would otherwise enslave those nations and the people therein for their rights to individual traditions and customs to which they are so entitled to practice. Number 1, the right to respect for private and family life, in accordance to Article 8. 1. Everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home, and his correspondence. 1.1. By reason of their direct and continuous contact with the vital forces of their countries, state authorities are in principle in a better position than the international judge to give an opinion on the, quote, necessity, unquote, of a, quote, restriction, unquote, or, quote, penalty, unquote, it is for the national authorities to make the initial assessment of the reality of the pressing social need implied by the notion of, quote, necessity, unquote, in this context. 1.2. Consequently, Article 10, Paragraph 2 leaves to the contracting states a margin of appreciation. This margin is given both to the domestic legislator and to the bodies, judicial amongst others, that are called upon to interpret and apply the laws in force. 1.3 of Article 8 does not merely compel the state to abstain from interference. In addition to this primarily negative undertaking, there may be positive obligations inherent in an effective respect for private and family life. These obligations may involve the adoption of measures designed to secure respect for private life in the sphere of the relations of individuals between themselves. 2. There shall be no interference by a public authority with the exercise of this right except such as is in accordance with the law and is necessary in a domestic society in the interest of national security, public safety, or the economic well-being of the country, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. 2.1. Whereas, in the absence of any requirement of a judicial warrant, the restrictions and conditions provided for in law appear too lax and full of loopholes for the interferences with the applicant's rights to have been strictly proportionate to the legitimate aim pursued. Number 2. Freedom of expression. Article 10 of the Convention is structured in 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph defines the freedoms protected. The second stipulates the circumstances in which a state may legitimately interfere with the exercise of freedom of expression. Paragraph 1 provides for 3 components of the right to freedom of expression: freedom to hold opinions, freedom to impart information and ideas, and freedom to receive information and ideas. These freedoms must be exercised freely without interference by public authorities and regardless of frontiers. 1. Whereas in Article 10, Paragraph 1, everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This right includes the freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by a public authority and regardless of frontiers. This article shall not prevent states from requiring the licensing of broadcasting, television, or cinema enterprises. 1.1a1. Under the freedom to hold opinions, individuals are also protected against possible negative consequences in cases where particular opinions are attributed to them following previous public expressions. A2. The freedom to hold opinions include the negative freedom of not being compelled to communicate one's own opinions. 1.2a1. The freedom to criticize the government was explicitly upheld by the court in 1986. It is incumbent on the press to impart information and ideas on political issues, just as on those in other areas of public interest. Not only does the press have the task of imparting such information and ideas, the public also has a right to receive them. A2. Whereas the existence of facts can be demonstrated, whereas the truth of value judgment is not susceptible of proof. As regards value judgments, this requirement is impossible of fulfillment, and it infringes freedom of opinion itself, which is fundamental part of the right secured by Article 10 of the Convention 15. 3. Furthermore, it would be unacceptable for a journalist to be debarred from expressing critical value judgments unless he or she could prove their truth. A4. Wherefore, there is no proof that the description of events given in the article was totally untrue and was designed to fuel a defamation campaign against GS. A5. What's more, even where a statement amounts to a value judgment, the proportionality of an interference may depend on whether there exists a sufficient factual basis for the impugnant statement, since even a value judgment without any factual basis to support it may be excessive. 1.3. This then shall also include subsection 1, freedom of the press, subsection 2, freedom of radio and television broadcasting. 1.4 A1 subsection 1. Hence, it is incumbent on the press to impart information and ideas on matters of public interest. There is no warrant in its case law to distinguish between political discussion and discussion of other matters of public concern. Wherefore, punishment of a journalist for assisting in the dissemination made by another person would seriously hamper the contribution of the press to discussion of matters of public interest and should not be envisaged unless there are particular string reasons for doing so. A general requirement for journalists systematically and formally to distance themselves from the content of a quotation that might insult or provoke others or damage their reputation was not reconcilable with the press's role of providing information on current event, opinions, and ideas. Therefore, without such protection, sources may be deterred from assisting the press in informing the public on matters of public interest. As a result, the vital public watchdog role of the press may be undermined, and the ability of the press to provide accurate and reliable information may be adversely affected. Subsection 2. Be it known, the purpose of the third sentence of Article 10, Section 1 of the Convention is to make it clear that states are permitted to control by a licensing system the way in which broadcasting is organized in their territories, particularly in its technical aspects. It does not, however, provide that licensing measures shall not otherwise be subject to the requirements of Article 10, Section 2, for that would lead to a result contrary to the object and purpose of Article 10 taken as a whole. A2. However, journalistic freedom also covers possible recourse to a degree of exaggeration or even provocation. Paragraph 2. The system of restrictions with the exercise of the right to freedom of expression. 2. Whereas in Article 10, Paragraph 2, the exercise of these freedoms, since it carries with it duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, for the protection of the reputation or rights of others, for preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence, or for maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. 2.1b1. In this respect, Article 17 reads that nothing in this convention may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth herein, or at their limitation to a greater extent than is provided for in the Convention. B2. Although it is legitimate for a state to impose on civil servants, on account of their status, a duty of discretion, civil servants are individuals and, as such, qualify for the protection of Article 10. B3. Wherefore, bear in mind that, whenever the right to freedom of expression of persons in such a position is at issue, the duties and responsibilities, quote unquote, referred to in Article 10, subsection 2, assume a special significance since it can be expected of public officials serving in the judiciary that they should show restraint in exercising their freedom of expression in all cases where the authority and impartiality of the judiciary are likely to be called in question. B4. Thus, the protection of journalists under Article 10 is subject to the proviso that they are acting in good faith in order to provide accurate and reliable information in accordance with the ethics of journalism. B5. Particular caution is called for when consideration is being given to the publication of views which contain incitement to violence against the state, lest the media become a vehicle for the dissemination of hate speech and the promotion of violence. B6. At the same time, where such views cannot be so categorized, contracting states cannot, with reference to the protection of territorial integrity or national security or the prevention of crime or disorder, restrict the right of the public to be informed of them by bringing the weight of the criminal law to bear on the media. B7. Article 10 of the Convention does not in terms prohibit the imposition of prior restraints on publication as such. On the other hand, the dangers inherent in prior restraints are such that they call for the most careful scrutiny on the part of the court. This is especially so as far as the press is concerned, for news is a perishable commodity, and to delay its publication even for a short period will deprive it of all its value and interest. B8. Henceforth, the relevant law must provide a clear indication of the circumstances where such restraints are permissible, and a fortiori when the consequences of the state, as in the present case, are to block completely publication of a periodical. This is so because of the potential threat that such prior restraints, by their very nature, pose to the freedom of expression guaranteed by Article 10.81. B9. And the dominant position which the government occupies makes it necessary for it to display restraint in resorting to criminal proceedings, particularly where other means are available for replying to the unjustified attacks and criticism of its adversaries in the media. B10. However, even the publication of items which are true and describe real events may, under certain circumstances, be prohibited. The obligation to respect privacy of others or the duty to respect the confidentiality of certain commercial information are examples. B11. Only in the rarest cases can censorship or prohibition of publications be accepted. This is particularly true in relation to commercial advertising or questions of economic or commercial policy. The protection of the interests of users and consumers in the face of dominant positions depend on the freedom to publish even the harshest criticism of products. According to paragraph 2, domestic authorities in any of the contracting states may interfere with the exercise of freedom of expression where three cumulative conditions are fulfilled. The interference, meaning formality, condition, restriction, or penalty, is prescribed by law. The interference is aimed at protecting one or more of the following interests or values: national security, territorial integrity, public safety, prevention of disorder or crime, protection of health, morals, reputation or rights of others, preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence, and maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. The interference is necessary in a domestic society. 3.1 C1. Strict interpretation means that no other criteria than those mentioned in the exception clause itself may be at the basis of any restrictions, and these criteria in turn must be understood in such a way that the language is not extended beyond its ordinary meaning. In the case of exceptional clauses, the principle of strict interpretation meets certain difficulties because of the broad meaning of the clause itself. It nevertheless imposes a number of clearly defined obligations on the authorities. C2. Whereas the phrase prescribed by law, quote unquote, does not merely refer back to domestic law, which is expressly mentioned in the preamble to the convention. The phrase thus implies that there must be a measure of legal protection in domestic law against arbitrary interference by public authorities with the rights safeguarded, especially where a power of the executive is exercised in secret. The risks of arbitrariness are evident. C2, subsection 1. This is further clarified that is not referring to any particular nations. Executive orders, though the ones known and are made aware of to the citizens therein, is the United States of America's executive orders, for which was installed without exercising that nation's constitutional rights for that nation's citizens to have the right for voter approval. This is in reference to executive powers that are considered the norm of any given nation's government that don't use such vices as executive orders. C3. And further, where the implementation of the law consists of secret measures not open to scrutiny by the individuals concerned or by the public at large, the law itself, as opposed to the accompanying administrative practice, must indicate the scope to the legitimate aim of the measure in question to give individual adequate protection against arbitrary interference. C3, subsection 1. And once again, the term secret measures is by no means a reference to executive orders of the United States of America, as it is actually a simplified by term definition and as opinion like that of a congressional measure or bill pending acceptance or being vetoed. Freedom of expression and national security, territorial integrity, public safety. 4.1. Wherefore, to deprive the public of information on the functioning of state organs is to violate a fundamental democratic right. 4.2. Hence, the press must be left free to publish news, whatever the source, without censorship, injunctions, or prior restraint in a free and democratic society. There can be no room for restrictions of that kind, and particularly not if there are resorted to, as they were in the present case, for governmental suppression of embarrassing information or ideas. 4.3. Moreover, the limits of permissible criticism are wider with regard to the government than in relation to a private citizen or even a politician. 4.4. Indeed, the message which is communicated to the reader is that recourse to violence is a necessary and justified measure of self-defense in the face of the aggressor, as it was also the public interest in the prevention of crime and disorder in the German population due to insulting behavior against Jews, as similar offenses and the requirements of protecting their reputation and rights outweigh in a democratic society the applicant's freedom to impart publications denying the existence of the gassing of Jews under the Nazi regime. Freedom of expression and prevention of disorder or crime. 5.1. As understood, while precious to all, freedom of expression is particularly important for political parties and their active members. 5.2. While freedom of expression is important for everybody, it is especially so for an elected representative of the people. He represents his electorate, draws attention to their preoccupations, and defends their interests. Accordingly, interference with the freedom of expression of an opposition member of parliament, like the applicant, calls for the closest scrutiny on the part of the court. Freedom of expression and morals. 6.1. This is expressed in the simplified terms of which are protected under the freedoms of opinion as part of this treaty. 6.2. That the practice and declaration of the right shall be for all nations, the right for the freedom of expression and morals, whereby given that the declared right to do so, should it be pronounced by any given citizen in any given nation, that certain classified or top secret documents, photographs, sat imagery, recorded conversations or videos, and the reports of eyewitness accounts of such elements or devices that are discovered be for the sole purpose of initiating a tactic against the people of that nation for the demise of world conquest, and thus a single nation ploys or plots against the people, starting with their own country, and then branching out by unwarranted invasion to be a sole ruler of the world over all nations, then the freedom shall allow such media the right to either prove or debunk any reports, whether it is considered as outlandish or far-fetched, by any other opposing opinions of the citizens of that same nation where such discoveries were made. 6.3. No nation government then shall impose as a means of cover-up or conspiracy to conceal that which has been discovered, be it a tactic of hacking and removing videos, or reports from websites like youtube.com, or any other web link of given information. And to do so would otherwise be a demonstration by that government that they have something to hide, whether they admit it or not. Hence, that in itself, as grounds of this treaty chapter to be initiated without malice, harassment, or threats to the media, and by not violating said constitutional rights, unless that particular nation's constitution grants them the right to do so conditionally. 6.4. The condition that is accepted then is if the information were proven as outlandish and far-fetched by those who promote anarchy or certain domestic terrorists who are anti-government. However, if the information and evidence is proven as not easily dismissed and cannot be debunked, as the media has taken advantage of the opportunity to investigate and see for themselves the evidence being reported, then the government working to cover up and commit conspiracies of murder, and thus writing it off as suicide, to cover those heinous acts of cover-up conspiracies from the general public or media, with the attempt to violate their own nation's constitution to freedom of speech and press, would otherwise prove that the government leader is corrupt and is attempting the same sadistic and satanic plots against the people as it were in World War II by the Nazi regime headed by Adolf Hitler for the modern plot of New World Order, or an evil plot equivalent thereof. Thus the media shall be protected under this treaty's chapter right 6.1 through 6.4. Example, Alex Jones with Infowars.com with former Governor Jesse Ventura from USA, and discovery reports of FEMA death camps and FEMA coffins. Freedom of expression and reputation and rights of others. 7.1. Freedom of the press affords the public one of the best means of discovering and forming an opinion of the ideas and attitudes of political leaders. More generally, freedom of political debate is at the very core of the concept of a democratic society which prevails throughout the convention. The limits of acceptable criticism are accordingly wider as regards a politician as such than as regards a private individual. Unlike the latter, the former inevitably and knowingly lays himself open to close scrutiny of his every word and deed by both journalists and the public at large, and he must consequently display a greater degree of tolerance. 7.2. However, in such cases, the requirements of such protection have to be weighed in relation to the interests of open discussion of political issues. 7.3. Moreover, it would be unacceptable for a journalist to be debarred from expressing critical value judgments unless he or she could prove their truth. 7.4. The facts are, news is a perishable commodity, and to delay its publication, even for a short period, may well deprive it of all its value and interest. 7.5. Civil servants acting in official capacity are, like politicians, subject to wider limits of acceptable criticism than private individuals. However, it cannot be said that civil servants knowingly lay themselves open to close scrutiny of their every word and deed to the extent politicians do, and should therefore be treated on equal footing with the latter when it comes to criticism of their conduct. 7.6. Whereas in Article 9 of the Convention, those who choose to exercise the freedom to manifest their religion, irrespective of whether they do so as members of a religious majority or a minority, cannot reasonably expect to be exempt from all criticism. They must tolerate and accept the denial by others of their religious beliefs and even the propagation by others of doctrines hostile to their faith. However, the manner in which religious beliefs and doctrines are opposed or denied is a matter which may engage the responsibility of the state, notably its responsibility to ensure the peaceful enjoyment of the right guaranteed under Article 9 to the holder of those beliefs and doctrines. Indeed, in extreme cases, the effect of particular methods of opposing or denying religious beliefs can be such as to inhibit those who hold such beliefs from exercising their freedom to hold and express them. The respect for the religious feelings of believers, or as guaranteed in Article 9, can legitimately be thought to have been violated by provocative portrayals of objects of religious veneration. And such portrayals can be regarded as malicious violation of the spirit of tolerance, which must also be a feature of democratic society. The convention is to be read as a whole, and therefore the interpretation and application of Article 10 in the present case must be in harmony with the logic of the convention. Otherwise, as Ambassador Spock would state, to do the contrary would be illogical. 7.7. However, the media has the duty of expressions that are gratuitously offensive to others. Such do not contribute to any form of public debate capable of furthering the progress in human affairs. In simpler layman's terms, it is not to say you should comply with the government in question and look the other way because they told you to do so, or because they violate that nation's constitutional rights to freedom of speech, press, and expression. It simply means, though the best intentions is to make the people aware of what the government is up to, weigh out the information in a sorted and organized manner. 7.7 D1. Thus, it's the media's responsibility to decide which piece of information is to be released and how much. D2. That if the media dumps too much on the people, for example, the United States of America, whereby the people who choose to not believe or listen to the truth when the evidence is available are labeled by such federal organizations as sheeple, that is, dumb as a sheep, is the result of too much of the truth and evidence being exposed by the media. Or, on the other hand, the media doesn't exercise their rights because the government in violation of that nation's constitutional rights and give out only a fraction of information, if any at all. They then get overwhelmed due to the fact that they never want to admit to having made political mistakes in voting rights and were too lax in luxuries to which we, the people, as it pertains to the great nation, the United States of America, or in any other given nation, to police their own government through the rights of petitioning the grievance and redress of such political violations, be it any given nation, that the people then have no choice but to suffer and reap the rewards of being shirkers and out of sheer laziness, didn't foresee the lessons learned of the ancient city of Troy that allowed the Trojan horse within the confines of their nation's security, the wall, that led to the city of Troy's demise. D3. That the media gives out not too little, but not too much, so that the person receiving such broadcasts can take it in gradually. The exception to that rule is if the people are so brainwashed, there is no hope for them anyways. Freedom of expression and the authority of impartiality of the judiciary. 8.1. That all sources of intel be protected under protection of journalistic sources and legitimate aims. 8.1 E1. Therefore, the protection of journalistic sources is one of the basic conditions for press freedom, as is reflected in the laws and the professional codes of conduct in a number of contracting states, and is affirmed in several international instruments on journalistic freedoms. E2. Without such protection, sources may be deterred from assisting the press in informing the public on matters of public interest. As a result, the vital public watchdog role of the press may be undermined, and the ability of the press to provide accurate and reliable information may be adversely affected. E2 subsection 1. Be it known then, as part of this treaty then, that any nation government conspirators who commit murder to silence the people of their right to speak out and reveal intel to the media, after which they set a falsified crime scene with a suicide note, so that the media reports it as such, shall be considered guilty of falsified evidence, tampering with the crime scene, murder in the first degree of a suspected domestic terrorist act, whether they are a national leader or hold the position as an act of a congressman who gave such orders to have that individual murdered and made to look like a suicide. Thus it will behoove the warrant of that person giving the order or setting the stage of a false suicide to cover up by conspiracy of what really took place to silence the individual as an act and plan for the evil New World Order or an evil dictatorship equivalent to that as it were in the days of World War II, during the Nazi regime, and in the days of Adolf Hitler.